Hey everyone, my name is Nathan. I'm the lead pastor at Pathway Church, and we're going through a series called The Bible for Grown-Ups. And what I've been saying is that each week, if you email in questions at pathwaylife.com, I'll do my best through the week to provide an answer. And this week's question comes from Egan, and Egan sent in this question by email: how old is the earth? And I'd like to say thanks for sending me an easy one, Egan. Nervous chuckle. This is actually a question that is... Well, it's considerably complicated, really, and there's been a lot of discussion and debate, particularly in the last 100 years. Modern science is now saying that the Earth is very, very old, where the biblical account, the narrative that we learned about this past Sunday of Genesis, when followed literally to its ultimate conclusion, seems to lead us to the belief that we have a young Earth, okay? And this is one particular way of looking at history and science. And this is to say that the Earth is approximately 6,000 years old. And the way you get that number is by looking at history, human history, and the biblical narrative, which takes you back to Jesus, around 0 to 30 AD. And then you continue to go back to the ancient Israelite kingdoms, Babylonian kingdoms, et cetera, et cetera. You follow the genealogies in the Bible all the way back to Adam and Eve, roughly 6,000 years. And then you have a literal 6-day creation account. So the Earth is 6,000 years old. Now, of course, as I said, modern science is saying, well, actually, no, the Earth is much older. So if I did a little timeline here, let's do this, 6,000 years. You probably can't see that on the video. That would be the literal biblical account. And then, of course, we have, the scientific sort of thought of the day, which is that, the Earth is much, much older than that, billions and billions of years old. And so you have a secondary sort of viewpoint on this, is what we'll call old Earth. Okay, and the question is, which does the Bible teach? And I'm just going to write in here 2 to 4 billion years. You can, plus or minus a billion here or there. What's the difference? So we have this extremely lengthy time period and this very relatively short time period. Well, it can't be both. And again, when we approach this from a biblical perspective, okay, we open up the Bible and we say, what does the Bible teach about the age of the earth? As I said this past Sunday, I believe that the Bible, specifically the account of Genesis, is more focused on who created and why he created, so that God created, there is a creator. I think that's fundamental. And secondly, that he created the earth, the sun, the moon, the stars for mankind, created mankind with a special purpose. So it really answers who and why, not the how and when. And so depending how you're reading the book of Genesis, if you're trying to read it as a literal scientific document that explains, you're going to run into some issues, although some people read it that way. And so essentially we have these two views. Now, how have people interpreted that? I would say for the last 2,000 years, most Christians, Bible reading Christians, would have sort of adopted the young earth. Hey, it's exactly as the Bible says. Now, of course, over time, evidence continues to sort of mount to say that the earth could be much, much older than that. Keep in mind, the aging of the earth is primarily done through aging rocks. So they study rocks and they go, okay, if the rock began with this much radioactive material in it and it decays at this current rate, then here's a rock with this much decay. And so they extrapolate out and say, billions of years. And other people argue and say, well, that's not a very accurate way of testing, and there could have been catastrophic causes. So you've got all of these kinds of ideas sort of rolling around. So how do Christians, and there are many Christians who believe in an old earth, who adopt the numbers given by science, and that's okay, and they do it through a number of ways. Number one, this is one that I learned about a long time ago. I call it gap theory. You can look that up and learn more about it. But gap theory essentially says that between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, okay, between those two verses, there is a huge expanse of time. So it would look like this. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. 1 billion, 2, 3, 4 billion years pass. And then this is where the creation account picks up in verse 2. And so then you have an old earth, but a young humanity, young civilization, and all of that. So you have this huge expanse of time. That's one way of interpreting the biblical account to accommodate this large span of time. I've heard some people say that between verses 1:1 and 1:2, there was a whole other civilization, which is really interesting. That the earth was filled with dinosaurs. It was a tropical paradise. And maybe even the fallen angels were on the earth, and then God had destroyed it with a flood, which is why in Genesis 1:2, the whole earth is covered in water. And then the creation process begins again, explaining dinosaurs, oil under the, anyway, there's all kinds of theories around that. So that's gap theory. The second one would be kind of interpreting the Genesis account in a poetic way, to say that it doesn't really mean literal days, even though that's how it seems best interpreted. That, that really the days of creation are really about the order and sequence in which God did it, and he did it over a vast expanse of time. Now, there's all kinds of theological implications to all these things, and I've already gone on for a while. So let me finish with these thoughts for you, Egan, and anyone else watching. Here's how I like to think about it. Science, again, people often say it's science versus, let's say, religion, or you could say the Bible, right? Science, that these two are at odds with one another. I don't believe that to be true. It's important to remember that science is a method, not a religion. At least it's supposed to be a method and not a religion. The scientific method allows us to test and retest and experiment and learn through this process of testing and observation. That's what science is. And so we test and we examine and we look at the world around us and we learn about it. That's the power of science. And again, when we think about religion, one of the interesting things about this is that science is possible, I believe, because there is a creator, okay? And that creator created things in an orderly way. He applied laws of gravity, the laws of nature, the various laws. And it's that order and those laws that God created the earth by that allow us to do science. And so even if there seems to be a conflict between science and what the Bible says and what God says, I really believe that science ultimately, when studied appropriately, will lead us back to our Creator. I mean, the deeper you dive into the human body, the cell, DNA, the more amazing you discover creation is. The further you go out into space, the grander the scale, the more I believe it points back to God. So this is fun to speculate about. I'm not sure where I land. I could probably make a case for, and I could probably make a case against each and every one of these ideas. I love to study it. I hope you will too. But ultimately, I believe that science is possible because there is a creator who created things in an orderly way, applied those laws, and that science will ultimately point back to the creator. So it's a long ramble. I hope it helped to answer your question, Egan, and maybe even spur you to do a little more study on your own. Have a great day.